Institute of Engineering, and I welcome you to our course evaluation training. We're going to go through some slides, and I'll hand it over to our presenter in a second. Before I do that, though, I just have a couple of announcements and a couple of housekeeping announcements. First of all, for those of you that might be new to this GoToWebinar, basically you have the capabilities to put a question in by typing it into your console. There should be a little bar there where you can type in questions, and I'll be monitoring them throughout the presentation, and we'll try to respond to you as they come in for the most part. There's also a chat box which can be used similarly. It'll allow us to send messages out to everyone on the call. Also, if you'd like, there's a raise your hand button that you can actually click this raise your hand button, and we'll get a notification that you have a question, and we can actually unmute you and bring you onto the call and be able to answer your question right here live on the call. All right, so with that, just a couple of announcements. First of all, in order for you to receive credit for this training, you're going to have to fill out a very simple, it's a quiz, but really we're more concerned that you go through and fill out all the questions to the best of your ability. The quiz will be emailed to you after the event tomorrow morning sometime, most likely. I believe the system sends it out the day after. And it will be a link to an online survey. It's very simple. It's about 8 questions. You can go through it, complete that, and then we will have a record of you that you have completed the training. There will also be a face-to-face training for those of you interested, or if you know anyone interested. We'll be doing a face-to-face training at our fall NYSSPE conference November 1st at the Hilton Garden Inn in Troy. So that'll be also available for anyone that wants to do the in-person evaluation, if you know anyone out there that does. If anyone's having a problem hearing me, you can enter it in now through the chat box. Hopefully this audio is okay for you. We have the phone between myself and Holger, who will be doing the training. The other thing I want to say, and then we'll get started, is if you are a new member or evaluator and you've submitted your application to the office, we will be getting you a member number within the next few weeks. And if you haven't submitted it yet, please do submit the application. You'll need to submit the new member application and the evaluation agreement and a copy of your resume to the office. And again, once we receive it, we will issue a membership number for you within the next few weeks. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to our presenter, Holger Lucas, who will take you through the training.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the training. This is going to be a course evaluation training based on the latest version of the manual. So if you're working with the older manual, please be aware that a new version is coming out or has just come out. Next slide. Okay, to become a PE evaluator, you have to be a New York State professional engineer and be a member of PI in good standing. In addition to that, to become an evaluator, you must submit a resume you have to attend a course accreditation workshop such as this one, and not to have a conflict of interest. Next. The PI evaluators are the ethical watchdog of the PI board. You are basically managing PI's core reason for it being, and you increase the excellence of the profession through training and new advanced subject for New York State education law and regulations. That's the catch, is that it has to be through New York State law and education regulations. It's not New Jersey, it's not California, it's not Wisconsin, but it is New York. So if questions come up as to the applicability of the laws of other states, please have the questioner refer to the laws of that particular state. Next.
Hello, Anthony.
Yes.
This is Marvin Spector.
Hi, Marvin. Do you have a question at this time?
No, I wanted to let you know I'm on by telephone, and the email that you sent to me is a retransmission of something sent to you, and using the codes on there doesn't work.
Okay. If you're on the telephone, we'll try to get you. I'll try to get you the proper email. However, I would recommend that you just stay on for now and listen along.
Yeah. Okay. I want to get the credit for sure.
Okay. No problem, Marvin. Thank you. Sorry about that, everyone.
Okay. As the PI Evaluators Authority, you determine the quality of the training. You're the standard bearer. The integrity of PI is in your hands. Big words. Next one. The objectives of this particular training session is to develop an understanding of the the continuation requirements of the New York State regulations, PI's policies for implementing New York State rules, PI forms and procedures, and best practices. The tools or references are the PI manual as a primary. And for those of you who are interested in following up and getting more detail, is the regulations of the Commission of Education, Articles 68.11, 68.12, the Education Law, Article 145, Section 7200, continuing, and a very good tool is the Frequently Asked Questions section on the NYSED webpage. Few definitions. A PDH, it's a professional development hour. It's one contact hour. To correlate this thing with other units in the industry is the continuing education unit, which is 10 PDH, or conversely, a tenth of a PDH is a tenth of a CEU is 1 PDH. The course of learning is any course with clear technical purpose and objective that will maintain, improve, or expand the skills and knowledge obtained prior to initial licensure, and to develop new and relevant technical skills and knowledge in the disciplines to be practiced by registrants. And the key here is new information. Relearning something you learned in your undergraduate degree is not continuing education. And there's the other term that is often used is other educational activity, which is other acceptable activities for continuing education credit. And but you're only allowed 18 of the 36 required credits using this information, and we'll get to that a little bit more later. Next. Definitions. A CE evaluator is a professional engineer and PI member. A CE training provider is a non-ABET accredited institution of business that offers continuing education course approval for PI. And a sponsor is a PI-approved organization that self-certifies its courses. Most of you are basically fall under the category of CE evaluator, and you're working, if you will, for the CE training providers, which may be your local society, local organization. Next, please. We already did that one. There we go. Okay. All right. Try to keep update and current and check periodically under the web page to get a current copy of the manual of forms. All right. We're going to hit a few sections of the manual. And October 2013, which is this month, is the latest revision. The important section to worry about is Section 4, which is the approval of courses. And in Section 4.1, it defines the types. 4.7 is the forms for approval forms. And 4.8 is the acceptance form, or the B4 form. The B4 form is the one you're mostly concerned with. Is you'll receive a B3 form with the application, and you will fill out and submit the B4 form, basically approving the course. Next. All right. The approval course is the Section 4.1 defines the acceptable training courses and activities, which are primarily engineering core competency, matters of law, ethics, professional development. Now, professional development, you have to be careful with. Not all professional development courses are acceptable by New York State Education Department for credit. And project or personal experience. All right. Next one. To work with and to approve the form, you will have to receive from the provider a resume or biography of the speaker or speakers, a course outline with contact time if the presentation is going to be longer than 1 or 2 hours, showing breaks and other activities, a copy of the presentation slides and or the handouts, and assessment of learning. Now, if you receive a copy of a paper but no presentation, you have to make the decision whether you have enough information to see what the provider is actually going to present. So be careful with that on there. Always try to get a copy of the presentation slides. It can be in PDF format, PowerPoint format, or whichever is acceptable. When I say you, the best thing is to work through staff and have staff provide you what you need. But that does not preclude you from going directly to the presenter or to the training provider. Approval. The evaluator's responsibility is to ensure that the courses to be presented meets the guidelines of New York State Education Department. The evaluators, or your responsibility, is not to determine if the materials presented is correct. That is a peer review. And you do not have to be an expert on the subject matter to be presented. As an engineer, you have the ability to look at something and determine, is this engineering or is this not engineering? Next. We've had some problems in recent past, and I will cover them, and please ask questions if you want to or need to. Is one of the critical things is, in the New York State educational requirements, you have to have an assessment of learning for all presentations. A submittal without assessment of learning does not meet the requirements. The other question that comes up periodically on there are things applicable to professional engineers, architects, land surveyors, and landscape architects. The answer is a qualified yes. You need to check the requirements on the web page on questionable items as to if they meet the requirements of that particular specialty, if you will. The common presentation that you'll be asked to review are what is referred here as to lunch and learn type of sessions, which is a 1-hour session either at lunch or at dinner. And here you have to make sure that this is not a sales pitch, that it focuses on content. There's a minimal use of the logo, and it must be substantive. The information must be, something new, something you're learning. A review of a company's sales brochure is not acceptable. And as far as the logo is concerned, if the audience cannot remember through the period of 1 hour who the presenter represents, he's not doing a good job getting across to the audience. Okay, all right.
You want me to go back?
That's right. No, that's fine. Okay. What is a course? It has concise educational and objective. It should be written, defined in the B3 form.
I'm just going to stop holding for a second. We had a question here
Okay.
that maybe you want to take. If one of 7 or 8 speakers doesn't include a bio, should the course be denied, or should only that missing portion be denied?
if you're missing all the speakers and you don't know specifically who's doing the presentation, you do not list that speaker's name on the B4 form, and in essence, he does not get credit for generating the presentation. You have to make the assumption on there that the missing information will be covered by one of the other speakers.
So if there's no information from one of the 8, then it would only be 7 PDHs.
Well,
unless they cover it.
There are two PDHs that are awarded here. Is the PDH to the audience.
Right.
They'll receive the number of PDHs requested. Let's say with the 8 speakers, they're doing a 4-hour presentation. They'll get the 4. Now, in addition to making the presentation, the speaker typically gets 2 additional PDHs for preparing the presentation. If there's no biography of the speaker, he gets no credit for preparing the presentation.
Okay.
Missing 1 speaker should not throw the course out.
Okay.
Unless it is a symposium type where there are specific speakers assigned to each particular topic. And if you're missing that particular symposium type, you adjust the PDH credits for the overall symposium presentation. And the attendees do not get credit for that speaker.
Okay, so not having 1 speaker's bio wouldn't necessarily disqualify the PDH for the attendees. It would disqualify the PDH that the presenter gets for preparing his presentation. And
it may reduce, if it's a symposium, it may reduce the total number of PDHs requested.
Okay.
Clear as mud, right?
Yeah.
All right. A course has to have a concise educational objective. It has to be a minimum of 1 hour, or 1 PDH actually. So a 20-minute presentation cannot receive 1/3 of a PDH. So many people, what they do is they take 3 20-minute presentations, create a symposium of 1 hour with 3 separate speakers. And then you can have the 1 PDH. And there has to be an evaluation of the training or an assessment of learning. The other thing is New York State Ed reviews these presentations. So avoid catchy titles because New York State don't like them. They don't give a good engineering objective. So if you receive a presentation with a catchy title, suggest on there that they change the title to an engineering type. The other problem that's been occurring on there is sign-in sheets versus attendance sheets. The attendance sheets, the attendee has to fill in all of the information, including his signature. While in the sign-in sheet, they just have to check the sheet, see that they're there. Well, anybody can put a check mark next to somebody's name. While on an attendance sheet, if they fill out the information, sure, somebody could forge somebody's signature, but the probability is greater that that particular person is there. So New York State requires attendance lists, not sign-in sheets. The other thing you should do as an evaluator is to attend and audit courses in your area to make sure that the presenter is following the guidelines and the formats that they put out, and that, for example, that the assessment of learning is part of the presentation and not just ignored. A question that came up recently on there with whether construction administration is an acceptable topic, and according to the New York State Education Department, it is. Next, please. One very important thing is when communicating with a training provider, do not give them a PI PS number until the course has been approved. We've had instances where the training provider has received the PS number. They've sent out information based on that before the course had been approved and the course was not approved. Okay, so that's created a paperwork nightmare. The other thing is, you want to check with the training provider if they want architect, landscape surveyor, or landscape architect approval in addition to the PE. I have always just checked the box on the B4 form based on the request on the B3 form. If they just check the engineering form, engineering, I've only approved it for engineering. If they want it for architect and engineering, let them say so. Don't assume that they want it. Okay. And you do not tell the training provider if the course has been accepted or rejected. All communication should go through the PI office.
Holger, someone had a question as far as the sign-in sheet. If you know that 10 people are coming to the event and you have their names, is it all right to have a pre-printed out sheet and they just sign next to their names?
That is acceptable.
That is acceptable. Okay, thank you.
The main thing is we want a signature.
Okay.
All right. Next one, please. Okay. The overall review is you scan the course to make sure that the subject matter meets the requirements of 68.11. And it's not an unacceptable subject. You check to see if it has a clear purpose, objective, and scope. And you understand more or less what is being presented. And you determine if it is a course of learning or other educational activity. Next, please. You look at it to see if the course duration can be determined. For example, if it's a 1-hour presentation and the guy comes in with 2 slides, you can say, well, I don't think he can talk a half hour on each slide. If he comes in with 150 slides, you can also say, well, there's just no way in an hour that he can discuss 150 slides. What is an acceptable number of slides? That's a judgment call. I've always used the rule on there, 45 plus or minus 15 for an hour. That's doable. But you have to look at the slide too on there, is because sometimes on there, if there are just visual slides on there, you can do 3 of them in a minute with no problem at all. So again, it's a judgment call. Test time, if it is a formal quiz or even it's an informal quiz, is included in the contact time in the PDH. So if there's, let's say, a 45-minute presentation and a 15-minute quiz time, it is acceptable for 1 PDH. Conversely, breaks, meals do not count toward course duration. So if somebody runs an 8 to 5 course with a 1-hour lunch and 2 lunch breaks, the 1-hour lunch and the 2 15-minute breaks are excluded. Courses of learning can be provided as classroom settings, videotape, audio, correspondence, a satellite video link with instructor present. The key is instructor present. If there is no instructor present, it may still be acceptable, but it comes under the category of other educational activity rather than straight PDH.
All right, there's a couple questions, Holger. What happens if you audit a class and it is different than what was approved? Do the attendees get credit?
The situation on there is you have to, what is suggested is that you submit a letter to the board, have the board review it, and have the board make a determination of whether the fault is flagrant, if you want to go as far as that is concerned. The basic suggestion is that if it's a minor situation, talk to the presenter for the presenter to learn that he does not repeat it.
So if it's minor changes, try to work it out with the presenter, let them know that should not be, the presentation should not be changed without approval, but can let it go if it's minor. But then if there's some significant changes, you should notify the PI board.
Right. For example, my personal experience on there, I went to a presentation, and to say the least on there is the presenter wound up to be completely polluted. Okay, he couldn't put a coherent word together, and the course had been improved. It was a good presentation, but it was just not presented. In that case, it was easy enough on there to suggest that the course be rejected and that the attendees did not get credit for it. The attendees that I talked to that were there, including myself on there, who was looking for PDH credit, we fully understand on there that it wouldn't have been fair. That was not really continuing education.
Right.
If somebody, for example, doesn't do the assessment of learning, figure out why they did not. If they ran out of time, it's different than if they had time left over and they just elected not to give it.
Right. So it's a case-by-case basis, but you can see by some of the examples that Holger's given is that, you got to use your judgment a bit. Another question that came in is, should the sign-in or attendance sheet be part of the submission process to evaluate the course? No, right?
No, the sign-in sheet is not part of it. When the PI office approves a course, they will send you a copy of a recommended attendance sheet.
Right.
Okay. That attendance sheet is to be submitted back to PI after the presentation is given, to go on file, and that is basically the record that the New York State Education Department will use to check credits. Now, the question here comes in, do you send the original and keep a copy? Do you send a copy, keep the original? I don't think that's important on there. The whole thing is you as a training provider, or the training provider, is required to keep the sheet. As an evaluator, you're out of the loop on that anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
Okay, another question is, for a self-certifying organization, can I scan the attendance sheets and Q&A submitted as PDF files and throw away the paper copies?
Yes.
Okay.
As long as a record is kept that it's accessible.
Okay.
Of course, you have to send that copy of that PDF to the PI office as well as a copy that you keep.
Okay.
As the regulations require.
So you can scan it, send it to the PI office, keep it.
Right. As a sponsoring organization, you don't send it to PI. You keep that on file, but you can be audited by PI, and then you have to present that particular paperwork at the time.
Okay. Another question is, what if an equivalent substitute was found due to a last-minute cancellation?
By that, I assume you mean a substitute speaker?
Yeah, I think that's
if it's substitute speaker on there, if the training provider can get the information to the evaluator before the presentation, that'd be great. If he's qualified. If another speaker will be giving it, but you can't get the information till last minute, let's say 15 minutes before the presentation, the presenter gets run over by a car, and you find a substitute, submit the credentials of the actual presenter to PI for a judgment call. The probability is very high that the course will be left approved as is, because that's the important part, and that the presenter is not as critical.
Okay. You're on 9, right?
Yeah, I think we're going on 10 now. We did number 8, right. 9. Okay, some other things on there that are acceptable. Course activity enhancing technical skills or professional development. The content either maintains or improves skills or knowledge of a professional engineer. The instructor has the proper knowledge and skills to teach the subject. This kind of falls to the previous comment on there. You don't want somebody who has no idea what the subject is to give the presentation just by rote. So you want the instructor to at least be familiar with the subject matter, such as you wouldn't want to have a secretary necessarily give a presentation requiring an engineer to understand. Nothing against secretaries, but most of them are not PEs that I know of. And the other thing is, you've got to remember that an assessment learning has to be planned as part of the course activity. That is, either, let's say you use quizzes, it should either be incorporated in the presentation, which is the preferred method, or the end of the presentation. But they can also be written tests on multi-level courses. For example, let's say a community college wants a course approved, which has been the case on there, is that then the test that they give to the student is acceptable as assessment of learning. All right. Next one, please. Demonstration type courses are acceptable as long as there's a continuing education objective and a learned skill is presented. For example, teaching you how to use a particular engineering program. It could be as little as how to fill out the environmental forms for a particular project. It could be on how to do grooved pipe, for example. So demonstration, as long as there's a continuing education type thing, it is acceptable. And you, as the evaluator, makes that judgment. Now, as far as New York State is concerned, refresher courses should only be credited for the time during that new material is presented. So if it's an annual refresher type course, the attendee only gets credit for that portion that is new. You as the evaluator do not know what the attendee's prior knowledge is. So let's say it's a 4-hour refresher course and there's only 1 hour of new material. You as the evaluator would approve it for 4 hours, and it's the attendee's responsibility to only take credit for the 1 hour. You cannot hold their hand on every little thing on there. It's between them and the New York State Education Department if they want to dispute the amount of new material.
We had a question, there are a couple questions. A course was presented by a lawyer. It discussed the risks associated with the practice of engineering. Is this an acceptable content?
No.
Okay.
Okay. New York State is, and I'll come to that a little bit later on there, was very clear in some of their question and answer, is that that's a business type. It is not a engineering type.
Okay.
Problem.
Another question was, is quote-unquote maintained skills in conflict with quote-unquote must be new design topics? So I guess the question is if you're, it's trying to help you with maintaining your skills.
Well, an example on there that's given on that New York State has given on there is, for example, learning AutoCAD is not acceptable because that's something you should have learned. But using AutoCAD in conjunction with, let's say, finite element analysis or very complicated type situation where you improve it or you do it again on there if you don't use AutoCAD on a regular basis, that would be acceptable.
Okay. Another comment that came in was to follow up on an earlier conversation during the session, it doesn't seem appropriate or fair to hold back PDH credit to an audience only because an individual did a poor job at presenting a PI-approved course. This would seem instead to be a matter for the PI evaluator to take up directly with the presenter. I think that it depends on the case. I mean, if someone comes to the course like Holger had described and they can't even deliver any of the content, then it's difficult, even though it's not necessarily the audience's fault, it's difficult to give them a PDH credit saying that they, were continuing their education towards their license when they didn't get the content and the information. It's definitely unfortunate, But I mean, I don't think you can just award the content if someone sat there for 2 minutes, didn't hear anything, and just because of the speaker.
Right. That's exactly it, Honor. Is that if you're auditing a course, or anybody that's auditing a course, whether you evaluated that course, if you're just going to a meeting where there are PDH credits, and you feel that you really didn't learn anything, it was really a waste of time kind of situation, you should bring that to the attention of the PI board, who then can take a look at it and says the next time this particular presenter wants to be certified, the PI board can say, no, we're not going to put PI's reputation on the line for a repeat offender, if you will. I know it may seem unfair to the audience who sign up and possibly even paid for the PDH credit, but if that's the case, they should go. If they paid for it, they should go back and try to get the money back.
Get a refund, yeah. Another comment that just came in: a course refresher on a subject that does not present new material may still be new to certain attendees.
Well, again, that situation on there is that it's between the attendee and the state education department as to whether they want to claim credit and how much credit.
All right, another question: do software courses qualify, for instance, HydroCAD or HCS, which are based on engineering theory?
Yes.
Okay. All right, here's a question that I think we've kind of been talking about. Is a tour of a project which given by the project's engineer and focuses on the technical and construction aspects of the project an acceptable course or an other activity?
It is other activity unless there is well, actually not really, there's no unless on this. For example, you have a situation if the architect engineer gives a 1-hour presentation followed by a 1-hour course, you will get 1 PDH for continuing education credit and 1 PDH for other educational activity. If it's just a tour of the facility, if there is an assessment of learning as part of the tour, it is 1 PDH of other activity. If there is no assessment of learning, it's 0, nothing. There is no credit. New York State Education Department has made it very clear that tours required an assessment of learning, which could really be a structured discussion at the end of the tour. What did you see? What did you like? As long as something is done.
Okay.
A lot of questions?
If an audience has not learned or been exposed to AutoCAD, could that then qualify for credit? Much the same as taking a continuing education course would qualify. It seems there's a couple of questions in regards to AutoCAD.
The New York State has made it clear that basic information that you should have learned or normally learn before you are certified or before you get your license are not acceptable. For example, basic AutoCAD is not acceptable. Advanced AutoCAD would be.
Okay, under the premise that if you're not going to start learning basic AutoCAD as a professional licensed engineer, most likely.
Right, for example, taking a course in algebra, which is an undergrad course, okay, even though you use it as a refresher, is not acceptable. But taking quantum physics, which is not an undergraduate course, would be.
Right. So, but Holger makes the point that if it's advanced AutoCAD, it could be acceptable.
Yes.
So, for those of you out there that have some comments about AutoCAD, that could be acceptable.
Again, as the evaluator, it's your responsibility and your decision to determine, is this continuing education or is this refresher? And if it's refresher, to what level is it refresher?
Another question came in. Would a course that focuses on methods of avoiding cyber attacks on your computer, such as be acceptable? I don't believe that would be an acceptable course.
It's not basic engineering on there. It's business. The cyber attack is not going to change your design. It's going to change your files, your
Right.
records.
It's the business side of things, the
business
administrative type things, not engineering design type of information.
Basically, business courses of any kind are not acceptable.
Okay. All right. Let's keep pushing on. Next slide, or are you still on this one? Next slide, right?
Let's see. Okay, we've covered that one. That was. Okay. We basically covered the first bullet, second bullet, and actually, this basically says on there is the third bullet on there, such as HAZWOPER, asbestos owner safety program, etc. These are required on an annual basis or triannual basis, very schedule on there, to maintain certain certifications, not the new license, but certifications. As far as New York State Education Department is concerned, new material is, you can get continuing educational credit. Old material, you cannot.
Next.
All right, next, please.
Okay.
In the course of learning, it's any engineering subject. Math and science, ethics, law relating to the practice of engineering, as different from laws relating to the avoidance of getting sued, quality control and safety, design and construction management. Right. Other educational activity, preparing and teaching a course of learning is other educational activity. As I said earlier, on a normal course with one presenter, you get 1 PDH for presenting it as a presenter and 2 PDHs for preparing it. The 2 PDHs are other educational activity. Online courses without an instructor, self-study, graded test. Some of these magazine tests on there where you read the article on there and you do a quiz on there. Those are other educational activity because you do not have the ability to ask a particular question at the particular time of the author. Other educational activity, as I stated earlier, is acceptable for 18 out of the 36. Most of us, I don't think we'll ever run into the problem that we will have more than 18 of them, unless we're, how would you say, people shy? We don't want to go to courses. All right, next, please. All right, where am I? Professional practice of engineering is performing professional services such as consultation, investigation, evaluation, planning, design, or supervision of construction and operation. This definition, like some of the other definitions, are included in the law. It's of any utilities, structures, buildings, machines, equipment, processes, works, a project where the safeguarding of life, health, and property is concerned. And where such services or work requires the application of engineering practice and data. The key phrase is engineering. It's not business. That's why you don't see too many licensed MBAs to only MBAs.
We have a couple of questions here, Holger. Can you give an example of a law related to practice of engineering? I guess a law related one that would be acceptable?
Not being a lawyer, I would refer you to the sections by Schwartz in the PE magazine, where a lot of stuff as far as legal and ethical responsibility of engineering are discussed.
Okay. We have one other question that actually came on through the email. Is an electronic process for attendee signature acceptable if the process used by the sponsor organization for collecting attendance, quiz, and course evaluation is electronic?
I don't see why not. If the whole purpose behind the attendance sheet is to ensure that the attendee is there. I've seen it at multiple meetings on there. I don't want to put any specific ones where people have walked in halfway through the course, signed the attendance sheet, walked back out, and then insisted they should get a certificate. I've seen it where people waited till the attendance sheet came by them, they signed it, then they left, then try to collect the certificate at the end. I've had people trying to have collect the certificate for their friends, their buddies who had to leave because of an emergency. The whole idea is you want somebody to be there and learn the whole thing. The attendance sheet is one attempt of trying to control it, rather than punching in and punching out as you enter the room to make sure. We also have to remember that engineers, by definition, are ethical. That's why we're required to have an annual ethics course, or I'm sorry, a triennial ethics course.
The question following up on that is, how is the attendance signature for the session being handled? And I believe it's handled through the attendance sheets, correct? Everyone signs the attendance sheet as they come into the presentation. And, I guess maybe and they sign it and then it gets submitted as we talked about before.
As an evaluator, you don't have to worry about the attendance sheet. That's not your problem on there. That's between the training provider and PI.
Right. Are there special guidelines for a presenter of an ethics course, the actual presenter, as far as, I guess, their credentials or? No.
Theoretically, on there is, as long as the course is ethics, and it becomes tricky on there, is that if it's a combination of law and ethics, presented by a lawyer, for example, you may say, okay, well, it's only half of this course is ethics because the other half is law. So it becomes a little more difficult. The ethics requirement are fairly new. It's not effective as July 15th of 2011. So it's only been in effect for 2 years, and there really haven't been that many questionable parts on there. There have been several presentations specifically by lawyers which have been rejected for not being ethics to being law.
Okay. So essentially you're really certifying the course.
Yes.
Ensuring that the course. Can you claim only one PDH for ethics per triennial period? I believe you're only required to have one PDH
That's
for
correct.
ethics for 3 periods.
You can do 36 of them if you want to, if you're ambitious.
Example of a legal presentation: engineers as an expert witness. I took an approved course on this a number of years ago. Thanks, Jim. All right.
I'm not sure what the question is here.
No, he was just mentioning that was a course he went to. Does the ethics have to be a course of learning?
No, that can be a refresher. I mean, most ethics on there is, you supposedly are ethical when you sign the oath on there as a professional engineer. And I think most of the state on there is trying to make sure that you are reminded periodically on there that you're supposed to be ethical. Some states are more insistent on it. For example, New Jersey requires 3 PDHs in the triennial period versus the 1 PDH of New York State. That's not to say that New York engineers are more ethical than New Jersey engineers.
Can it be in other activity?
Well, why? It is.
I guess it might not fit that category.
If the evaluator feels strongly that it does not match anything in the engineering profession, but the state specifically says that courses in ethics are acceptable continuing education.
Okay.
I'm not sure why you would want to worry about it being other.
Okay. if someone's asking about the course today, getting your certification for taking this course today, I mentioned earlier that we're going to be sending around an online survey tomorrow, probably tomorrow morning. When you take the survey or the questionnaire and you complete it, then then we'll send you the proper certification, the proper notification that you attended.
You do not get PDH credits for an evaluation course.
No, right. This is just for the certification that you went to the training.
We're using the attendance sheet to make sure that we can certify you that you attended.
Okay. All right, let's keep going with the presentation.
Okay. Next one, please. We've covered that. We covered that.
Okay.
Okay, matters of law. I think we've kind of covered that.
Yep.
You asked the question about what matters of law, rules, regulations, or codes. Okay, next one, please. Professional development on there, and we've pretty much covered most of this. And the only comment on here is, if you feel that this is not continuing education, that is leaning more toward the other education activity, you as the evaluator have the right and or responsibility to accept it as such.
Okay.
Next, please. Okay. Courses that deal with the topics that increase the business skills of engineering, such as accounting, human resource management, political lobbying techniques, would not be considered acceptable courses of learning. That is the important part, is any business-related course. For example, let's say you take a course on there on how to increase your business on there through advertising. That would not be engineering. Project management courses are a kind of a gray area in that they're both engineering and non-engineering in some cases. And you as the evaluator have to make a judgment call. You want to give full credit, no credit, or partial credit. Next one, please. Another area which quite often presents a problem is project or personal experience. These courses can be either continuing education or other, depending on the topic matter. And again, it's the evaluator's judgment call that determines on there of what he or she wants to do. Next one, please.
Let's see. We got a couple of questions here. Can I take or qualify an online recorded ethics program as an ethics requirement?
I believe yes. It would be other educational activity unless the instructor is present at the time.
I believe you can as well too. That's more obviously the state requirements, but I believe you can.
I've not seen anything from the state clarifying that or saying it is not electronic, because the state does accept electronic courses. For example, a recorded webinar, and a lot of them are done on there where you basically have no instructor present, you go through it on there, is fully acceptable.
There is some kind of limitation, though, isn't there, to the number out of the 36?
18.
18, right. Okay. Courses on project scheduling methods, can those be offered? I think that's kind of in what you were talking about with project management, right? That's
project management. You have to read the wording and the law on there and look at this particular course of what is in it.
Okay. All right. We're on this one, right?
All right. The key is on other education activity is that assessments of learning are required for self-study courses, educational tours, and webinars without instructor. You cannot have a webinar, for example, without a quiz and get credit. Unless it's an instructor. All right. Next one, please. Other non-acceptable subjects: general management, self-improvement, writing skills, meeting management. For example, we all know that engineers can't write, but a writing course, unfortunately, is not acceptable. I personally think it should be mandatory, but business development, political lobbying, risk management, and other administrative subjects. Okay, next one, please. The New York State web page, which you may want to refer to in the Q&A section, specifically lists some of these, and I may be repeating what I said earlier, that project management related to, and these are not acceptable, project management related to improving, maximizing profitability and professional skills, marketing and public relations, expanding a design professional's business, laws relating to arbitration, mediation, liens, and limiting the design professional's liability, unless they are related to safeguarding the health, safety, and welfare of the public. For example, as asked earlier about the course of a lawyer and how to avoid getting sued, that would fall under the exclusions of New York State.
All right, 2 questions. Can a course be split into 2 30-minute sessions on separate days if the second part is a continuation of the first session?
Yes, provided that the attendee is present on both days. You would get either nothing or everything credit, and 2 separate attendance sheets would have been done, and somebody has to reconcile the attendance sheets.
All right, a comment, basically, engineering risk management should be acceptable, such as with factors of safety, etc. Again, I think it would be, you'd have to review the content, but I'm sure if there's some technical factor of safety information in there, it could be acceptable.
If it's risk management where it discusses factor of safety, thing like that, or what to design for, yes. But it's risk management as to fencing, that kind of thing like that on there to keep people from falling into ditches, would be no.
Right.
So you'd have to use the evaluator's requirement is to review the material.
How about a course on how to write engineering specifications? It's kind of a tricky one. I guess if it's engineering...
Off the top of my head, I would say it's not acceptable.
Okay.
But use the evaluator would need to look at it under of what it does. Does it cover technical aspects, or does it cover risk? Because a lot of your technical specifications cover risks and things like that.
Okay. All right, let's keep going here. Oh, sorry, did I... Which one are you on? Did you finish this one, Holger, or are you starting this one?
Okay, next one. Okay, another continuing under what is not acceptable by, as shown on the New York State webpage, real estate licensing, basic AutoCAD, personal estate or financial planning, zoning as relates to increasing a developer's or engineering surveyor's profitability. And the tricky one is design, build, or alternative delivery method. I'm not an architect. I'm not involved in the highways and kind of stuff like that. But my understanding is that currently design and build is only acceptable during certain specific cases. And the state has held that if you're doing a presentation on a particular a design and build project that was accepted by New York State, a presentation on it is acceptable. But a presentation that says why you should do design and build versus regular construction projects would not be. I know it's tricky with the fluidity of the law right now, so you have to keep your eyes and ears open. Okay, next please. All right, the course and purpose, and here's where we run into tricks periodically on there, is we all like jargon, we all like slangs, we all like abbreviation. The people in the New York State Education Department that review these things are not experts in our field. They don't know our abbreviations. They don't know our slang. So to keep from getting questioned, don't use it. Okay, have a clear course title. All right. The title should not be catchy. For example, one that's been rejected is How to Save the World with Plastic. Okay, that's a little too catchy. Change it over. Plastics in the Modern World, for example.
Okay.
The New York State Education Department will question courses with catchy or vague titles. They won't outright reject them, but they'll come back to either PI or the sponsoring organization, or whoever asking the question. Give us an explanation of this. All right. The objectives should be stated at the start of the course. Could be in the outline. It could really be on there is on the flyer that you sent out on there advertising the course. But there should be an objective. The outcome versus the hours is reasonable. Again, as I mentioned earlier, 2 slides don't make a course, and 1,000 slides definitely don't make a 1-hour course. The outcome should be measurable, and that's the assessment of learning. The objective should define the subject and how the learning is going to be measured. It doesn't necessarily have to be as a firm statement on there. It may just be a statement on there. It says, we're going to learn how to build an ark, and we're going to measure it, you know, and there'll be a quiz determining on how many cubic yards of wood you're going to use. Or in the case of the ark, cubits. All right, next one, please. There's some examples here, and I won't go through them because we basically discussed them already. As I said, a common outcome is successful completion of 2 quizzes and a test will verify your learning. This would be for a larger symposium. It won't be for a 1 hour. And the 1 hour lunch and learn ones on there, you can be much more lenient, and you can, because people are not going to lose their attention span in a 1 hour, but they may lose it in an 8 hour. Next one, please. All right, next one. I think I'll cover that. All right. The forms of assessment of learning, we've kind of covered those. It could be quizzes, written or oral, interspaced throughout the presentation. This is actually the preferred method on there, is that you present something and then there'll be a question. That way you're sure the questions get in. But you can have the questions at the end. And I find that a lot of the courses that I attended is that because of time constraints, that falls off on there in that the presenter will not have time to questions and answers. So I prefer, from an evaluator standpoint, I like to see them in the presentation because I know they're going to be asked. They don't have to get 100% right. There's no such thing as a passing grade. And one other one on there, for example, that's commonly used on there is the course material is used as an example, applied to an example. You may, let's say, take a course on there, build a bicycle, and at the end of the course, you build a bicycle.
Okay, I just want to say, because I'm getting a lot of questions on this, when we're finished, probably tomorrow morning, you're going to receive an online survey to take just to confirm that you attended the webinar. Once you complete that, we will send you we can send out a copy of the presentation. We will send you a copy of the slides in a PDF format. A lot of people have been asking for it. So as soon as you complete that form, as our confirmation, we can send you those slides.
All right. Other forms on there is exercises, demonstrations, homework, written tests. I've seen homework on multi-day presentations where homework is given based on the first day presentation, and the second day It's typically not done on the third day if it's a 3-day presentation. And the review of the homework is acceptable from a time standpoint for the PDHs.
Holger, someone's asking, they're saying we use webinars and use poll questions throughout the presentation. Are these acceptable?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Some of the lessons we have learned from getting chastised by the New York State Education Department, for example, is that a course is non-compliant if the assessment of learning is missing. So it is required much more so than a biography. In my personal opinion, the order of importance is presentation and assessment of learning rank one and one. A biography is not as critical because you can make the assumption that the guy going to give the presentation, if he's written the presentation, knows the subject matter. It's only a few instances that I've seen where a person who is not qualified has given a presentation. But it's possible. The other thing is, in the certificate, in the ad and everything else like that, if the course is an other than educational activity, it must so state so. All right, next. Okay, one thing that pops up periodically is contact time. The law says on there you have to have a 50-minute duration as a minimum. And that basically allows you 10 minutes worth of overhead. But that does not mean that if you have 5 50-minute presentations, you get 5 PDHs. Okay? The PDH would be based on 60 minutes of anything over a 1-hour presentation. So 100 minutes is not 2 PDHs, it's a PDH and a half. Fractional PDHs are acceptable. And other thing is, when there are breaks, such as lunch and intermediate breaks, attendance must be taken after each of them to ensure that the people that were there in the beginning are still there after the break. No sign up for 1 day covers all. Next one, please. The evaluator, on evaluation documentation, the evaluator will approve or direct each course and activity and assign continuing education PDH credits. If you reject or reduce the PDH hours, you should put a description of why in the comment section. To be exact, I would recommend very strongly you do this to refresh your own mind 6 months from now on there when you were asked about it. If you reject the course, it goes to a PI officer to be reviewed and either accepted or overruled. If you reduce the PDH hours based on contact time or other reasons, it can go to an officer if you or the training provider so desire, but it does not go there automatically. The transmittal letter approving the course will come from the PI office, will not come from the evaluator. Okay, next one, please. PDHs are based on 60 minutes, not 50 minutes. PDH is based on contact time. Subtract meal and breaks. PDH adjustment is not subject to PI officer review. Fractional decimal PDHs are allowed for courses exceeding 60 minutes. They're not allowed for courses of less than 60 minutes. Other thing that is quite often sent to you that you can use in the evaluation are handouts, course flyers, timed lesson plans, where somebody will put exactly how many minutes on each slide, this kind of thing. They're not required, but anything over 1 to 2 hours should have an outline of where the breaks are, what's going to be covered. A synopsis or an abstract, it may be in the learning objectives, it may be separate. Many training providers will have their own evaluation forms where the presenter is rated, things like that. These forms are not required for PI evaluation. They're not necessarily required for PI's files, but if you receive them, keep them for posterity, keep them on the record. Okay.
There was a question that says, I'm confused. A moment ago it was stated that 50 minutes equals 1 PDH. Now it says 50 minutes does not equal 1 PDH. Please explain. I think that was for a lengthier.
A PDH is based on, if it's for one hour, from the first hour, you can have it 50 minutes because there's 10 minutes worth of overhead.
Right.
Another way of putting it on there is you're given a 10-minute for the day overhead allocation.
So in other words, if it's a 1-hour course that you're attending, it's got to be 60 minutes. If you go to an all-day event where there's, 4 or 5, something like that, then after the first one, the additional ones can be 50 minutes? Or?
No, the additional can be 60 minutes. Now, the first, let's say you have a multiple course in the day. The first presentation can be 50 minutes. All following presentations have to be 60 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, for one PDH. But they can be fractional. Let's say you have, you do a presentation for 50 minutes and then a 30-minute presentation. That can be a 1.5 PDH course.
Okay. Because the first one's allowed 50.
Right, the first one's allowed 50.
Okay. And if you're doing multiple presentations in a day and you want to take a break, it just doesn't count towards the PDH.
The 15-minute break does not count.
Right.
Even though theoretically you may be out there talking about the presentation.
Right. Okay. All right.
But the instructor is not standing with you, and that's the whole thing like that. You don't have the contact with the instructor. Okay. Instructor is just a general on here is that says the resume or biography confirms the instructor's knowledge and that he or she has sufficient knowledge in the subject area. Next. All right. The question always is about, are the PDH credits acceptable for architects? And my understanding is, and again, I'm not a lawyer, but architects are legally conterminous in practice with PEs in New York State, which says that an engineer can do what an architect can do and vice versa. So if it's acceptable for engineers, it should be acceptable for PDHs. Caveat here is, that's New York State. This is not necessarily the case in a lot of states. So it's up to the attendee to determine if a particular thing is acceptable in his particular state. Same thing on there is New York State PDH is transferable or acceptable by other states. And the attendee's requirement to make sure that he checks the law in the particular state that he's concerned with, see if it's acceptable. For example, I'm also registered in Minnesota, and I have to check periodically on there because there are some material that is not acceptable by Minnesota, but there's other material that's accepted by Minnesota, not by New York State. So it's the approval by PI does not absolve the attendee or the licensee from determining under whether he is compliant with the law.
Just so everyone knows, we're running a little over on time, but that's only because we fielded a lot of questions here. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to finish up the presentation, and then we'll stick around if there's more questions. But I'm going to hold the question till the end right now.
Okay. What you have to do on there is, if the presentation is strictly to something that an architect would never be involved in, you could say it's not acceptable. But in general, as I said, check the law. Life safety, etc., are always acceptable in pretty much for all professions. Similarly, and I'll skip over them, landscape architects and landscape architecture, again, check the law, check the regulations. And my rule has been, if the training provider does not ask for it, I will not automatically check the box. If the training provider only checks engineering, that's all I will check on the B4 form. If he checks engineering and architecture, then I will check the law.
Okay.
All right. In closure, for your benefit and for all parties concerned, is in the comments area, put in any conditions or understanding that you established either by the information provided, your conversation with the training provider, and really you're not precluding from talking to the training provider. Nobody says you can't talk to the other party, you can't identify yourself. It's up to you. And same thing with any relevant documents, forward them to PI to put in the file, so that if PI gets audited, the information is there. Lessons learned, please, and I cannot emphasize this anymore, submit any lessons you learned, any problems, anything like that, to PI for review and for the edification and education of the rest of the members. Because there's always something crazy that comes up. Well, I thank you for your time.
All right, so at this point, what we're going to do is we'll finish up the couple of questions here that came in, but for those of you that are, I don't want to hold anyone on the call, we have completed our training here, and we will send out the online survey tomorrow, and when you take that, we will send you a copy of the slides as a confirmation that we received it. Give us a few days to go through all the responses. We had 60 people on the call here today, which was great for the first time doing this by webinar, and most likely we'll continue to make this option available. Of course, as well as our face-to-face trainings, which we will have, the next one will be in November at our NYSSPE Fall Conference in Troy on November 1st. So with that, I'm going to jump into some of the questions we have here. If it is a 50-minute course, does the assessment of learning time count toward the 50 minutes?
Yes.
Are all AIA approvals okay for PEs?
Well, as I said it earlier on, there is, again, unless there is something crazy in the presentation, it would be acceptable based on that. As I said, an engineer can do anything an architect can do.
Okay.
There may be some of the aesthetic things of architecture that may not qualify. But again, if in doubt, read the law.
Okay. Suggestion: when I review landscape architecture or LS credit, I usually have an LA or LS I know review it and give me a note or email that they concur it is appropriate training. It helps me feel comfortable with the decision to approve these for this profession. Thank you, Howard, for the suggestion. We had some excellent questions during the session. Can they be posted on the PI website for future reference? That's a good point. We'll look into that. We are developing an FAQ for the new PI website, which is going to be launching on or about November 1st. Let's see. What is the easiest way to check the law? Website, right?
It's easy. Just if you look at the PI manual on there, the references are there to the particular section of law. Just use Google or whatever you want to use on there and go to it.
If one is a current PI evaluator and attending this as a refresher, do we need to register in any special way? No, you just have to take the survey we're going to send out tomorrow. That will get you. That'll take care of everything you need to have happen. There's a couple other things here. Vehicle and traffic law can that be taught? I would think it's like Holger said before. You got to look at the content, because traffic law. I mean, is there traffic technical situations and the guidelines in there? I mean, it sounds like the answer might be no to that question, but I think you still have to just look at the content.
Well,
you don't know what it is.
Right turn on red versus put a traffic light in on there probably will not be, but curb heights, median heights, things like
Right.
that on there probably would be.
Right. If you are challenged getting review materials, can you post-certify a course?
No. New York State does not allow post-certification.
Okay. The question on AIA credits is in regards to courses offered by AIA. AIA offers LSU and other credits. Which form of an AIA credit can an engineer use? My understanding is that it is only LSU credits count.
LSU credits, that's life and safety, automatically count. I mean, there's no question about them.
Okay.
Some of the other architectural ones on there, you have to check the specific content of the presentation. As I said, it's not automatic that a AIA approval is automatically an engineering approval. But I would say most time it is. I've personally not run across one where it wasn't.
Yeah. Okay, last question is it true that an assessment of learning is not necessary for a course to be considered other educational activity?
An assessment of learning is required for other educational activity, unless it's some of the special ones. For example, on there is if you're writing a paper for a technical society, no, that would not be required. But if it's a tour, if it's a self-study, anything like that, it is required.
Okay. All right. And someone is saying to me on the email that this course was supposed to end at 1:30, and we apologize for that. But like I said, when we planned this, we had no idea we would have 60 people on the call. It's the first time doing it, and we also fielded a lot of questions during the call. So next time when we do the training, we'll allot for 90 minutes because I think that would be more appropriate. So with that, I want to say thanks again for everyone for attending. Thanks to Holger for coming in and doing the presentation, and we will again schedule this again in the future, and we will get the surveys out to you tomorrow, and then once you complete them, we'll send you a copy of the slides, and you'll receive the credit for the training. Thank you, everyone.